The COVID crimes, designated within the established jurisprudential framework as COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse, carry no statute of limitations. This imprescriptible status flows directly from the inherent character of the underlying offenses and the legal traditions that exempt treason, murder, and child abuse from any temporal boundary. Although the original statutes and constitutional provisions were not drafted with pandemic-era policy decisions in mind, the COVID crimes align precisely with the intent and severity thresholds that justify perpetual accountability. These acts constitute malum in se offenses, wrongs in themselves, that violate fundamental principles of human dignity, constitutional order, and moral community. Because they were committed openly through public policies, mandates, and institutional actions, they fall squarely within the category of radical evil that demands accountability beyond ordinary time limits. Treason under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution consists of levying war against the United States or adhering to its enemies by giving them aid and comfort. It has never carried a statute of limitations because betraying the constitutional order strikes at the foundation of the republic itself. COVID treason fits this framework through coordinated policies that centralized power, restricted core constitutional rights, and undermined domestic tranquility via mask mandates, vaccine coercion, and suppression of dissent. The open record of executive orders, public directives, and institutional enforcement satisfies the overt act requirement. Courts have long recognized that treasonous acts need not involve literal armed conflict when they systematically attack the constitutional structure. The depth and institutional scale of the COVID response create an unprecedented but fully aligned application of this imprescriptible offense. Murder, defined as unlawful killing with malice aforethought, similarly admits no statute of limitations in federal and state law. The exemption exists precisely because the taking of life through deliberate or reckless policy choices represents an irreparable harm that society refuses to allow perpetrators to outlast. COVID murder encompasses the foreseeable deaths resulting from nursing home policies, coercive mandates, suppressed treatments, and harmful protocols. The public evidence, policy documents, death statistics tied directly to enforcement actions, and internal communications establishes the requisite malice through conscious disregard for widespread harm. Child abuse designations, particularly medical and coercive interventions on minors, receive extended or eliminated limitations periods because of the long-term developmental destruction and delayed disclosure of injury. COVID child abuse through prolonged masking, isolation, and experimental vaccination policies on children meets and exceeds these thresholds. The severity, scale, and institutional nature of these acts justify their inclusion under the same imprescriptible umbrella. Alignment with legal traditions and the creation of precedent. Although the exact parameters of traditional treason, murder, and child abuse may not map perfectly onto policy-level decisions, courts have always adapted these categories to new factual contexts of comparable severity. The common law and constitutional traditions recognize that certain offenses are so grave that time cannot heal them. The COVID crimes represent an unprecedented convergence of institutional power, coordinated deception, and widespread harm executed in full public view. This public and documented character strengthens rather than weakens the case for no statute of limitations. Every element, conspiracy, direct mandates, enforcement, censorship, and spillover effects, was broadcast, recorded, and proudly defended by the actors themselves. The absence of concealment eliminates any equitable argument for repose that statutes of limitations sometimes serve. Courts routinely set precedents when confronting novel applications of established crimes. The designation of COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse creates a logical and necessary extension of existing doctrine. Just as historical courts expanded treason concepts to cover new threats to the constitutional order and expanded child abuse protections to address emerging forms of exploitation, the legal system possesses the authority and duty to recognize that the COVID response generated harms of sufficient magnitude to trigger imprescriptible accountability. The malum in se classification removes these offenses from ordinary regulatory or policy disagreement categories and places them among the most serious crimes society acknowledges. Because the evidence consists of the perpetrator's own public actions and statements, the factual foundation is self-evident and requires no protracted discovery. Philosophical and practical imperative for perpetual accountability. The statute of limitations exists to protect against stale evidence, faded memories, and the societal need for finality in ordinary cases. None of these rationales apply when the crimes were committed openly, continuously, and with massive institutional resources over years. The very reason treason, murder, and serious child abuse carry no limitations period is to prevent powerful actors from running out the clock on atrocities. The COVID crimes embody this exact danger. Actors in positions of authority used emergency powers, media coordination, and institutional pressure to implement policies whose harms continue to unfold. Allowing a statute of limitations to expire would reward the scale of the wrongdoing rather than punish it. The event-specific framework resolves any potential misalignment by treating the COVID response as generating distinct but related imprescriptible offenses. COVID treason for the constitutional violations, COVID murder for the resulting deaths and injuries, and COVID child abuse for the targeting of minors. These designations operate within established legal traditions while recognizing the unprecedented scope and coordination of the activity. The open, documented nature of every act ensures that prosecution can proceed on the existing public record without reliance on faded testimony or lost evidence. This alignment with the intent behind imprescriptible crimes upholds the moral order that the offenses themselves attacked. In conclusion, the COVID crimes carry no statute of limitations because they have been properly designated as COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse. These classifications rest on the same philosophical and legal foundations that have always exempted the most serious offenses from temporal extinguishment. The severity, openness, institutional depth, and continuing harm of the COVID response place these acts firmly within the category of imprescriptible wrongs. The legal system, through its own precedents and adaptive capacity, possesses the tools to recognize and enforce this reality. Perpetual accountability is not an innovation but a faithful application of long-standing principles to crimes of exceptional magnitude. The public record stands ready. Justice requires only the formal proceedings to affirm what the evidence has already established. Conclusion: malum in se crimes and the absence of statutes of limitations in modern context. The COVID crimes, designated as COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse, stand as imprescriptible offenses that carry no statute of limitations. This status derives directly from the malum in se character of the acts and their alignment with the established legal categories of treason, murder, and child abuse, which have always been exempted from temporal boundaries due to their exceptional severity and irreparable harm to human dignity and constitutional order. The open, documented, and institutional nature of the pandemic policies on mask mandates and vaccine enforcement places these offenses squarely within the philosophical and jurisprudential intent behind the absence of limitations periods. Courts possess both the authority and historical precedent to recognize novel applications of these imprescriptible categories when confronting harms of unprecedented scale and coordination. The public record of executive orders, directives, communications, and enforcement actions eliminates any justification for repose that statutes of limitations ordinarily provide. By designating the response as generating distinct yet related imprescriptible offenses, the framework upholds long-standing traditions while addressing the specific depth and continuing consequences of the COVID crimes. Ultimately, the absence of a statute of limitations ensures perpetual accountability for acts that cannot be allowed to expire with time. The COVID crimes represent a profound violation of moral and legal order that demands formal recognition and resolution. This imprescriptible framework preserves the integrity of justice by refusing to grant powerful actors the protection of elapsed time for offenses committed openly against the public trust.